this is the most modest Rotary club in the country, because as a very junior officer, my superiors and betters used to write about me that there was much that I had to be modest about. I've had an interesting background. When describing myself, I used to run a $30 million engineering shop, but I'm not an engineer. I used to be head of HR for one of New Zealand's largest organisations. That was my first job in HR. I used to be Deputy Chief of Navy. I'm not a seaman officer. I'm a director of Cricket Wellington. I never played the sport. So clearly I'm a leading authority on stuff that I know nothing about. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about emergency management, and I describe people in society using that little chart there. I talk to people from everybody from disinterested to actually empowered. And what I mean by that is there are people who disown their own continuity, much to my surprise, and there are people who are very much on top of it. Can I urge you, if you switch off, you listen to nothing I say, when you leave this organisation, there's some pamphlets just outside. In there is a 12-point plan on how to be prepared. If you do nothing in the next week of any value, fill that out and you'll be an awful lot better off than where you were before. So, naturally enough, not many people in that first category asked me to come and speak to them. Now, some perceptions there. One is that emergency management is an emergency service and we're poised to respond in an emergency, just like international rescue. You know, you ring them up and the Thunderbirds come screaming out and sort things out. Well, I can assure you there'll be nothing further than that's very far from the truth. What I do want to say is that we have a very important role, but you're part of that role as well. The second thing to remember is that the councils have a very important accountability under the Act, but they can only do so much, and they require people in the community to actually be part of the solution. And I'm going to talk about that later on too. The last point there is that Wellington, and I've lived down here for a number of regions, we have a morbid fascination with the big one. Now the big one might arrive tomorrow, and it might arrive in 500 years' time, but we can pretty much guarantee that there's going to be a number of emergencies which are going to occur in the next year. Now I'm just thinking of simple power outages, water outages. I mean, who would have thought that Wellington would have had a drought that required people to actually meet every day just to make sure that it was managed appropriately and to stave off having to drink out of bottled water. We will have floods, we will have storms. They may not be across the whole region, but they'll be in some part of the region, and so there's a very important role for us. The next thing I want to talk about is that most civil defence organisations are structured to respond in an emergency, and yet 99% of the time we don't have any emergencies. And therefore, we've actually structured our new organisation to do what we should be doing in that other 99% of the time. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that later on. A little bit about our region. We're one of 16 throughout the country. The largest in territory, Canterbury. Largest in population, Auckland. The smallest in both those is the Chatham Islands. 624 people, I think it is. But we're a region very much like the other 15, except a number of differences. One is we've got the seat of government. Two, we're the portal between the North and South Island. Three, unlike Christchurch where there were 30 roads in and out of the city, we have everything passing along two traffic corridors, one perched precariously on the side of a cliff and the other one going across a mountain road that range that in the event of a small storm or a bit of wind, it gets closed. So you can see we've got a number of challenges. Also, the whole region is inextricably linked. Most of us live one part of the region, work in another, and in some cases our children go to school in another part. So something that occurred on the 2nd of July last year, rather than have 9 civil defence teams supporting 9 different councils, we developed one civil defence team supporting all 9. You'll appreciate that in Wellington City they had a rather large team, but on the other end of the scale, Carterton, anyone from Carterton here? Right, okay, I can say this then. They had 0.2 of a person because he was the dog catcher. So we've got one team supporting all 9 councils. So we do have a joined up approach. Now that's not possible without good leadership. And I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the mayors and the chief executives of our council. We could not have achieved that without them being so firmly on the one sheet of paper and being right in behind what I'm doing. It's great. A little bit about our risk assessment. I could talk for hours about this, but very briefly, very high in terms of consequence, earthquake. You'll see a lot of other potential disasters there. Not all of them are natural, some of them are man-made. For instance, lifeline utility failure. That's the thing that happens the most often. My power goes out from time to time. The old chorus guys broke my water pipe the other day, and so I had to get into my bottled water just to do something like clean my teeth. But we do get floods with storms. I'm very interested in that, but what I'm really interested in is the fact that I'm interested in how we manage the consequences, and that's where I come in. A little bit about how we actually do emergency management. In the industry we talk about the 4 R's. Reduction, that's making sure when you buy a house you don't buy it in a floodplain and then complain about it later on. Making sure your chimney's not going to fall down in an earthquake. Readiness, that means about taking basic precautions, having some basic plans, and not only just having material preparedness enablers, but managing that social side too. How many of you know the surnames of your 10 closest neighbours? How many of you have actually had a quality conversation with them saying, well, in the event of emergency, hey, I've got a water tank, I've got a barbecue, I've got this and 2 tins of baked beans. Together, if we band together, we should do quite nicely for some time. Third one is response. The fourth one's recovery. And there are other R's. I mean, the cynic would say down in Christchurch there's a 5th R, it's called retribution, and it's if you get it wrong. So if you view civil defence more as a system rather than a team of people, I've got 20 people, and that's not sufficient to have a quality one-on-one relationship with the 500,000 people of the region. So if you view us as a bunch of people in the middle there, actually energising council resources, community, emergency services, business and volunteers, then you've got a much better picture on how we do business. Now, one thing that we have done in Wellington, and as I say, we've been able to do it because of that very close leadership, and that's take a totally fresh approach. As I said before, most civil defence organisations are structured to respond, but it only occurs 1% of the time. It's a very important 1%, but the other 99% of the time, what's really important is that we engage with our community and actually build up that level of resilience out there in the community. I think that's very important because a resilient community is able to respond and recover much quicker than one that isn't. So if we start at the bottom there, it's a top-down approach, it's a bottom-up approach. So if you start at the bottom, I'm interested in talking with individuals. I'm interested in having resilience at a household and a business level. And to do that, we have a number of tools. One of which is just sitting out that side waiting for you to grab it and fill it in. And that's that It's Easy 12-point plan. It's called It's Easy for a very good reason. Business continuity planning. I know that exists out there. Most of it's targeted at large corporates. I want to make sure that the Joe's Fish and Chip shops has some continuity too, because they're actually essential if we're going to be able to respond and recover in a disaster. We want them to have a good deal of continuity. We have hazard maps. I can show you whether or not that your house is in a floodplain or in a liquefaction zone. And we have a number of preparedness enablers that I'm going to talk to you about later on. The next the tool that we're looking at is trying to bring neighbourhoods and streets together. And so what we're going to do is develop a tool called Map My Street. We've stolen the idea from somebody else. But quite frankly, if we can get people, if we can start putting that neighbourhood back into, the neighbour back into neighbourhood, we'd be a lot better off. Those people sitting down and having those quality conversations that I told you about before. We also want to tap into the community neighbourhood support network, because that does some tremendous work out there. But if we actually expanded its role to include emergency management things, then we'd have a much stronger community and neighbourhood. At the community level, we're going to be out there in the community talking to people, developing community response plans. In some other regions, I know, they've produced hundreds of these damn things, and what they are is just tick-off lists. That's not sufficient. What we want to do is sit down in each community, and we started at Tawa, Eastbourne and Otaki, is actually sit down with residents and key people in that community board residents, people who actually run the grocery shops. We did a pilot over in Wainuiamata, a great pilot, because that's a community that can be cut off. And we sat down with them, and they actually formulated their own plan, what they would do. And because it's their plan, it's more likely to work, and they've got ownership of it. I don't know about you, certainly when I was in the military, people used to think I used to line everybody up in rows of 3, yell at them, and away they'd go and jump to it. It didn't work, and I don't imagine it works outside the military either. So actually having community develop their own plans with our support is really important. The Blue Line Initiative was a community response to a single hazard. That's now in Awhiro Bay, Houghton Bay, Island Bay, and we're actually working our way around. But that was the community that came up with that idea. It's just recently won an international award. I mean, it's embarrassingly simple, but sometimes it doesn't cost a lot of money to come up with great ideas. And at the top there is the Emergency Operations Centre. That's a network of 5 centres right throughout the region that activate in the event of emergency, and I'll show you a little bit about them later on. So I've said to you that community resilience is really important. So my team of 20 structured into 3 business units. The middle one is community resilience. We're the only region in the country that I'm aware of that actually has a full team out there working in the community. The right-hand team is operational readiness. They're the ones actually developing the standard operating procedures, making sure that our emergency operations centres are equipped, ready to plug in people to make them work. And of course the left-hand team is business and development. We like to think ourselves as a high-performing organisation, so that there are standard things that any high-performing organisation needs to do, and that's strategic planning, developing plans, standard operating procedures, monitoring, evaluation, managing technology, doing all those things. So that's how we're structured, really different from other regions. But in the event that we do have a disaster, that's how we reconfigure. Now I liken it to my old life as a naval officer. I was responsible for some of the support arrangements for the Anzac ship. The Anzac ship has 160 people in it. We have people doing maintenance, we have people doing administration, we have people doing operations on board. But when somebody pushes the action alarm, there's no administration, there's no maintenance, everybody has an operational role. And so that's our model going forward. A little bit about the Emergency Operations Centres. It's run by a controller. Each council pretty much has one of these. There's a planning and intel section, an operations section, logistics and welfare. So it makes sure that all our actions are coordinated and we achieve a very integrated and holistic response. A little bit about the organisation and what we've got planned going. At the moment, we're in public consultation with our group plan. That's a strategic level document, but that's the document that drives all our lower tier documents. It's really important to take a systematic approach to what we're doing. Ad hoc initiatives, no matter how good they are, will never succeed. So that's the document that provides guidance to our community resilience strategy. Once again, we think that's the first time that anybody's produced one of these things. I know that community resilience includes economic resilience, health, education, all those sorts of things, and that my part of that pie is material resilience and social capital. So we have a number of programs out there, either active in the community, and I was very pleased to meet one of our civil defence volunteers at this lunch today. What we're trying to do is infiltrate all sections of the community. I have networks, but my networks don't extend to other people's networks. So we move by that indirect method. A little bit about some of the initiatives. On the left there is that tsunami safe zone. What it was, when we talked with the community, they said, well, wouldn't it be great if we actually knew how far inland we had to go or how far up a building we had to go? And because it was their suggestion, we did it. Now, if I'd just gone and painted a a blue line on the side of a road, A, nobody would know what it's there for, and B, well, geez, you know, what's the science behind this, you know? What if I stand 1 foot on this side? Does it mean I get swept away? So it enables us to have quality conversations in a community. Down on the left-hand side, it's the easy booklet, the one that I want you to take away. On the right is what we call a grab-and-go bag. So if you live in a zone where it may be that you have to evacuate your house at short notice, that's a bag you can grab and take with you. Now, they used to be $200. That's far too much money. In fact, one of the learnings from our survey was that lower socioeconomic groups don't have as many preparedness enablers as others. So we work with an importer. It's not my business to get involved in the market, but we'll get in there and muddy the waters when I feel it's important. We work with an importer and develop that, and we brought it in, and they're available for sale at New World and Moore Wilson for $69. Great value. The next thing we're doing is the 200-litre water tank. We thought of it prior to the drought, but now's the time to strike when there's some interest there. I bought a 250-litre water tank about 6 months ago and plumbed it into my downpipe. So every time it rains, it makes sure it's full. When I plumbed it in, it only took me a few minutes to do, really simple. And when I was finished, I put a bucket outside. And in the time it took to fill 1 inch in my bucket, I filled the 250 litres. On average, it rains in Wellington every 3.5 days, apart from the last 2 months. So that is a replenishable supply of water. It's really important. We don't live without water. If you haven't got water, you have to evacuate. It's not something that we want to do lightly. So water is really important. People need at least 3 litres per person a day. In our survey, we actually said, do you have sufficient water? And 66% of the people said yes. And in the survey, we defined sufficient as we said 15 litres for 10 days per person. 66% people said yes. Now, if there were 4 people in your family, that's 600 litres of water. Bullshit, sorry. I don't want to do a Susan DeWoy here. I certainly have no wish to be referred to the newspapers tomorrow as a slow train wreck. In fact, it's coming up to my deadline, so at the very least I'll be a fast train wreck. So that is another really important enabler that hopefully will be on the market in a month's time, and we reckon they're going to sell like hotcakes. Now, I have left a couple of minutes. That's the end of my slide, hopefully, if I remember correctly. Yes, very happy to answer any questions you might have. Sorry, it's a really quick tour de force through emergency management. Really happy to come back and talk to you in more depth later. One of the challenges for us is trying to find solutions that, and all solutions don't meet everybody's needs, I suppose. That will only work if you've got access to a downpipe. The other preparedness enablers will work. We've actually been working on something else too, compost toilets, which don't work quite as well in apartments as well, although could do, although perhaps the outcome's slightly, you know, you think of it as unsavoury, but the reality is, in a disaster, when the pressure's on, you do what's necessary. I can only suggest that you do what a lot of businesses do. They require people to have large water bottles underneath their desks at work. Certainly in the regional council, you'll find that everybody has a big plastic one. You can buy those things at the local council. So I suggest you go and buy some of those. Either that, or you're into getting the old fruit juice containers and having several of those and replenishing them at least every 12 months.
Thank you.
We're actually working with telcos at the moment, trying to understand some of the response times. You'll appreciate that there was a very large report came out November last year, actually saying how long it would take to restore electricity, water and all those other essential services to various parts of the city and indeed the region. This is where I say it's really important. If you have something that's valuable to you, then it's really important you safeguard it. It doesn't matter whether it's a diamond ring or indeed your business that you've invested a lot of money in. Down in Christchurch, there were some businesses that were able to grab the laptops that they'd taken home that night and access their backup storage, which was off-site and carry on business as if nothing had happened. A great example, for instance, was New Zealand Cricket. Their headquarters was right in the middle of town. They moved out to Lincoln, where their high performance centre was. So it was possible for some businesses to do that. You're right, the cloud will not be accessible in some parts of the region, maybe for a week or more. It's really hard to say. I have an iPad that's got a lot of information on Google Drive, but I've actually downloaded on the hard drive of my laptop, of my iPad, so that in the event that the internet is down, I've got all that information that allows me to be a much better responder. So it's about that first slide. It's about whether you're interested, disinterested, whether you have ownership of everything that is important to you, including your life.
Thank you. Time for one more.
Once again, there's no one set plan to communication. You've got to have a layered communication plan, otherwise the message doesn't get through. We actually have a texting alert. I don't think it's on that little booklet outside, but if you go to our website, it's getprepared.co.nz. It's in the process of being modified, so it's much easier. These days, people don't go to a computer to actually check these things. They want to do it on their smartphone, so we're trying to make it a lot more accessible by smartphone. But we do have a text alert. You've got to sign up for it. It's really simple, but there is a little stage that you've got to go through, and we provide that advice that eliminates you getting a whole lot of spam, because unfortunately that's one of the byproducts of using somebody else's product. You probably didn't get a notice saying that yes, it's all activated and things like that. We only use that network in an absolute emergency. So if we've got something important to say, we will say it. If there's nothing to say, then we won't say anything, because its value as an emergency hotline, I suppose, is only value while if you get something from it that it's out of the blue and it's important. If I was to sort of say, and by the way, I've arrived at work and I've done some great deeds for the day, you're just going to switch off. It's about like the great meal that we had here today. You remember those special things you don't remember if you just ate beans and rice every day.